to be a member of the Congressional Black Caucus. This is the biggest Congressional Black Caucus in history. I think right now we're at about 52 members. And also historic in that 6 members of the Congressional Black Caucus hold the gavel as chairs, unprecedented, representing Homeland Security, Foreign Affairs, the Financial Services Committee, which I serve on under the great historic leadership of Chairwoman Maxine Waters, the Education Committee, and also the Agriculture Committee. So I did want to lift that up. And my sisters and brothers in the CBC for this 51st culmination of the ALC. I know we all come here looking fine and Natalie attired because thank God Black folks don't look like what we've been through. But CBC ALC is about policy. And so myself and my brothers and sisters in the CBC are hosting sessions on a wide range of topics, from mental health to housing to education to wealth building. And we do this collectively to raise the nation's consciousness of the hurt and harm caused by legislation. Legislation that fails to address the problems that our communities face.
And start broadcast. If you want to learn how to take
policy violence, I think it is intentional. When there's intentional discrimination, that is policy violence. Pardon me. When there's neglect and apathy, there is policy violence. And for too often, when Congress discusses issues of consequence to our community, it fails to incorporate our perspective. It fails to incorporate our lived experiences. So the solutions that are proposed are deficient. And our neighborhoods are left under-resourced and our problems unresolved. When I ran for Congress the first time in 2018, I ran under the mantra that the people closest to the pain should be the closest to the power, driving and informing the policymaking. That was not just a slogan for a t-shirt. I meant it then, and I mean it now, and it's important that that is in practice. And so that's what we are doing here today. Those of us of Black America, we have been the closest to the pain, and we should be steward of the solutions. And that is why I'm convening today's session on defining Black immigrant justice, policy solutions to create a welcoming, equitable, and just immigration system. Black immigrants must be a part of our nation's discourse on fixing the immigration system. At every level of government, we must hear directly from people who have experienced the immigration system if we seek to truly transform this system. Black immigrants, Haitians, Ethiopians, Cameroonians, Jamaicans, and so many others are not included in the public media discussion. And might I add that I don't know if enough of us in Black America are committed to and connected to the global struggle of Black folk everywhere. If Black lives do indeed matter, and Haitian lives are Black lives, Nigerian lives are Black lives, Cameroonian lives are Black lives, then we must all be committed and invested in the work of liberation.
In this video,
the policy violence of this currently unjust immigration system. Black immigrants are dreamers and DACA recipients, TPS holders and asylum seekers and refugees. Black migrants are your neighbors, your co-workers, people whom you worship with. So it's critical that we include immigrants from the African diaspora in every policy discussion on immigration. The U.S. has a responsibility to accept those fleeing unspeakable violence and tragedy, to embrace them warmly and openly. But since I am amongst family, and I am seated at a table with justice seekers and truth tellers, I think it is also important that we confront the fact of the matter is that U.S. foreign policy has contributed to the destabilization of many countries with our foreign policy agenda. In my district, the Massachusetts 7th, we have the 3rd largest diaspora of Caribbean immigrants, many of them Haitian. That is in part why I helped to resurrect the House Hate Caucus. And alongside my co-chairs, we have legislated, advocated, and fought for policies in close partnership with civil society organizations to create a stable and safe democratic nation. But the work isn't limited to one country or one caucus. Our destinies are tied. From Haiti to Nigeria, to Guyana, to Black immigrants from all across the globe. I'm in Congress to do the work of Black liberation, and that has no geographic boundaries. Black lives matter everywhere, and no matter where they come from. And I'm confident that today's panel discussion with experts and advocates on Black immigrant justice, many of whom have been my teachers, will demonstrate just that. Unfortunately, one of our esteemed panelists who was promoted in this, Portia Olayiwola, who is the poet laureate actually of the city of Boston, had a last night health emergency, a late night health emergency, and so she's unable to join us, and so we wish her a quick and full recovery. And just as I transition, I also want to send up prayers and our thoughts to Floridians. Now I want to introduce Joy Reid, who will serve as our moderator. Can y'all believe that? Joy Reid is the host of The Read Out on MSNBC, the author of multiple books, including Fracture, Barack Obama, The Clintons, and the Racial Divide. We Are the Change We Seek, the speeches of Barack Obama, and The Man Who Sold America, Trump and the Unraveling of the American Story. Before joining MSNBC, she was the managing editor of thegrio.com, a daily online news and opinion platform devoted to delivering stories and perspectives that reflect and affect African American audiences. Reid joined thegrio.com with experience as a freelance columnist for the Miami Herald and is editor of the political blog, The Reid Report. She is a former talk radio producer and host for Radio 1. Reid graduated from Harvard University. That's an addition you can claim. In 1991, with a concentration in documentary film, and is a 2003 Knight Center for Specialized Journalism Fellow. Thank you so much.
And one thing that the wonderful Congresswoman left off of my bio is that I am a ardent Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley fan. I am a fangirl of this lady because she is heroic in her advocacy for us, and she is unapologetic, not just unapologetically Black, but unapologetically fierce and diasporal, and cares so much about our community. So when this sister calls, there's not that many people who I will literally jump when they say it's time to go. And you mentioned the wonderful Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who is another stalwart, and I was so honored to be a part of the panel on Shirley Chisholm, which actually fits in. So it was a beautiful meshing of events on these 2 days. So thank you for having me. I want to now introduce our incredible panel. I got a chance to chat with these folks. I'm lucky. I get to actually chat with them beforehand, get to know them a little bit. So sitting just beside the Congresswoman is Robbie Philippe. Robbie Philippe is an immigrant advocate of Angolan descent who crossed the southern border and experienced the immigration system firsthand. So we're going to let you hear Robbie's story. Nana Giamfi is the executive director, beside Robbie, of the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, which is the largest Black-led social justice organization representing the nearly 10 million Black immigrants and families in the United States. And then just to the right of Nana is Yvonne Commodore Mensah. Is it Commodore or Commodore? Commodore. Look at that. It's spelled differently on my thing. I apologize. So Yvonne Commodore Mensah is a cardiovascular nurse epidemiologist whose current program of research seeks to reduce the burden of cardiovascular disease risk among Africans in the United States and globally through community-engaged research. And then just to my left is Ruthie Louisian, who is an at-large member of the Boston City Council, the first Haitian American to serve on the council. So history in her own right. And so I do want to start start, and I'm going to let you all know that we're going to have about 10 minutes of Q&A time, so hopefully you guys will start thinking about your questions. We're going to want you to direct your questions to one individual panelist so that we can make the time very efficient. When you do ask a question, please keep your questions succinct. We're going to act like we're on TV time. Pretend it's a commercial break that you got to get your question in so they can get their answer in. But I do want to start by asking, and I want to ask this question in a particular way, because I love the way the Congresswoman talked about immigration is not a separate issue from everything that is about blackness in America. Blackness is diasporal. It is global. And people come to this country for so many different reasons and in so many different ways. So what I want to start by asking Robbie Philippe, how did you come to be a part of us? How did you come? Tell us about your journey to come to be a part of our community.
Came here on the 2019, landed on Brazil. That's where we started our journey. We took buses and walked through the whole South America, crossing from Brazil, Colombia, Panama, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Nicaragua, to Guatemala. And from that city, it was on when we got into the city of Mexico in Tapachula. Everything changed there. Like the whole process was already anti-black. All black immigrants, they were being treated very differently from other immigrants. They got access while black immigrants were being denied access in all kinds of possible ways. And in Tapachula, we got stuck to the detention centers for about 2 weeks with no care of any black immigrants or food or anything. But once the detention center got so full, they started releasing people, and once they started releasing people, they just sent us to go straight to the detention, to the asylum offices where we could get our passing visas. But from there on, they never told anybody anything. They just released all the black immigrants in the city of Tapachula, where they had no access to food, water, or any shelters. And they just told us, like, manage your own way out. But it was already about thousands of black immigrants that were being denied that access of passing visas within a couple of months. So we waited for a couple of weeks and nothing happened until people started getting sick. And there was no help from the immigration, no help from the Mexican government. And we decided to do a protest because it was just so much. None of the black immigrants were getting access to anything, while other immigrants, they were being helped. So we started a peaceful protest. And from the moment we started a peaceful protest, we got attacked by the police military of Mexico just by doing peaceful protest. And to demonstrate them why if you guys keeping us locked up here, at least you should help us in a way that we feel helped. We're sleeping on the street, we have no food to eat, we have nobody to contact. But at that moment, they started attacking all the black immigrants. But luckily, people started hearing news of what was happening, and more immigrants around the town started getting united. And after that, the head office of the immigration of Tapachula chapters came and told the press that it was all a big mistake, that every black immigrant will get a passing visa within the next couple of days. And we should go back to the asylum offices. So we decided to do that just to stay calm, because that's what we're all looking for to move forward. Some of us went to the office and some of us decided to stay near to the detention center because there was no place to go. For the part that went to the office, and the one that were left, we got attacked by the police military of Mexico, which were beating women and children while we were not there. And then once we got notified of the news, we came back to the same place and started protecting those who were left there, because we felt tricked. You told us to go and get passing visas, while at the moment you decided to attack the harmless people that were there that couldn't help themselves. and it kept on going for about 6 months. The same situation. We fought for any type of petitions. We had a petition that we wrote even for the president of Mexico, but nothing changed. The whole country was against us. We couldn't let any black immigrants get out of the city of Tapachula, and we got locked in the same place. If you try to leave, we take you back and they lock you up. But after 6 months of the same fight over and over again, we started getting released. But they were targeting the main activists of the program, because they thought the one who could speak Spanish, they were the one who were organizing the protest. And we think that they attacked some of us. They even attacked a friend of one of us that they thought it was supposed to be me, but they got somebody else, and they were saying that this is my country, this is our country, we'll keep you here, we'll do whatever we want to do with you here, because this is our country. And after 6 months of just that fighting, they decided to release us. And I was the only person that never got to get away from the place, because the head officer of the immigration said that he's not getting any document, he's not going anywhere, he's going to stay here in Tapachula, he's going to die here. So while everybody was leaving the country, I was the only one to stay there because I could speak Spanish and different languages of helping the others. I asked a friend to help me out. He gave me a card visa so that I can disguise myself as him and got to the border of Acuña.
I mean, this is a harrowing story, but it's one that we don't hear. And now I want to ask you how common this experience is, because when we hear the border, and it's become a very politicized issue, it's always about brown migrants, not black migrants. But there, what is the prevalence of this story of black migrants who are also trying to get into the United States to seek asylum through the southern border, and this treatment, this anti-blackness that is mixed in with the, anti-immigration sentiment?
Thank you for that question. Thank you so much. And of course, I want to start by thanking the Congresswoman. Your opening remarks really laid out what our task is, what we need to do as Black folks united, as a diaspora, in order to build the Black power we're looking for. And so when we talk about people coming through the border, and again, Robbie, I know Robbie from that time period. He was speaking 12 different languages, helping to get all of these people together to push forward. And it's not the first time in 2019 that you have Black migrants that are coming up through that border, coming across the Darien Pass, through the jungles, and all of the heartache, all of the anti-blackness that folks have to experience on the way. And so now it's something that people talk about even more, a little more than they did before. But we're talking about folks at the border in 2006, 2007, right, in terms of the U.S.-Mexico border, coming from that route. You had this increase of Africans coming, joining Haitians and other folks from the Caribbean, and we know that these countries that folks are traveling through, they don't really want their own Black people, feel me? So they're not looking at other they're not looking at other Black people coming, talking about, hey, we're excited about this, right? And the impact of what we call the externalization of the U.S.-Mexico border, when you talk about foreign policy, the way that the United States has taken its border and now stretched that border all the way to the tip of Chile, so that other people are engaged in this militarized enforcement. Other people are engaged in this detaining in horrible detention prisons, as Robbie describes. This is something that is happening to this day, and if people are able to make it to the border now because of Title 42, because of metering, because of the migrant protection program that traps some folks, such as Haitians, some Black migrants, like Ifuna, that haven't really been ended, those people, after all this suffering that you just heard, are now stuck to suffer some more at that border. And if folks are interested in reading more about that, they can read our report on our website. There's a target on us. There's other reports that have been written as well, just talking about the virulent anti-Blackness that Black asylum seekers deal with coming into this country before they get to the anti-Blackness they're going to deal with inside this country.
Yeah, and Yvonne, there are very real health effects from this kind of migration, where it's not formalized and systematized, and healthcare is not provided, and where people are pretty much just sort of left to founder where they are or stuck, as Robbie was. What are some of the health effects of this really, I don't know how to even describe it, this cruel non-migration migration? It's not, there's not even a real system here.
Right, absolutely. And first of all, thank you so much. It's an honor to share space with all of you. I have to share that I'm originally from Ghana, was born in Ghana, came to the U.S. in, yes, hello, I came here in 2004 for college, and in thinking about different ways that people arrive in the U.S., I have also had unique experiences in terms of what it means to be a Black immigrant and an African immigrant, and people asking questions about, oh, I'm surprised you speak English. How did you arrive here? Did you ride on the back of an elephant? How did your parents pay for your fees, right? So a lot of sentiments that are pretty shocking. But one of the things that I'm particularly focused on is the health of migrants, especially African migrants or immigrants in the U.S. And everything that Robbie shared was so heartbreaking. And unfortunately, when we think about migration and African immigrants, people think Ebola, they think TB, they think HIV, they think infectious diseases. And in terms of how we screen and health conditions that are prioritized, if you go to the CDC website right now, you'll see certain health conditions that are prioritized, and all of them have to deal with infectious diseases. And I would argue that African immigrants have hearts too. They also suffer from hypertension, diabetes, and other communicable diseases, right, and non-communicable diseases. So the journey itself is perilous, and people may acquire a lot of these conditions as they migrate to the U.S. and other developed countries. And if indeed health is a fundamental human right, we should also consider the health of migrants, not only infectious diseases and the things that Americans want to protect themselves from, but holistically, everything that has to do with their physical health, their mental health, and think about the experiences that immigrants like Robbie have had along the way, where people blatantly discriminate and physically harm you. What does that do to you when you arrive? And when you arrive in a country and you're expecting freedom, right? Land of the free, home of the brave, right? And you get here and you experience the opposite, where you want health care and you're told, well, we can't get health care because you don't have these documents. So all of these issues remind us that as we think about health and immigration as a social determinant of health, we should not forget the Black immigrant population.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ruthie, I want to ask you about, to sort of pivot off of that, you represent a community in Boston. You are a Black legislator, and so people's assumption, right, is that you are representing African Americans. And yet you yourself are Haitian origin. This is one of the 3 largest Haitian diasporas in the country, Boston. There's also Miami. And what is the third? New York. New York, the 3. And so you have to take this global view. So talk a little bit about the complexities of that, and how you are received in terms of being a representative that is both a Haitian American and representing African Americans.
Thank you, Joy. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I also, before I delve into that, I want to just say thank you to my Congresswoman, who is the reason why I'm here, and who does an amazing job representing the Haitian community here on the Hill and back home. And it's a credit to her, the work that we've seen happening and the policy that we've seen moving is because of her relentless advocacy on behalf of Black migrants, on behalf of Haitians, on behalf of Black liberation. And she was saying that this is the biggest number of members of CBC. Well, just so y'all know, Boston City Council, this is the most people of color we've ever had on the Boston City Council, and that is because Congresswoman Blaze was the first woman of color, first Black woman to be elected at large, but at large by the entire city of Boston. And so I walk in her footsteps, and I'm grateful for her advocacy. I think that I represent the city of Boston, and the city of Boston is a majority people of color city, and the city of Boston includes a lot of Haitian people, right? The third largest Haitian diaspora. So I represent everybody, and I will especially represent my people. For me, it is not a zero-sum game. The work that I do for my community, for Haitian people, is the work of Black liberation. We are all tied together. And so for me, when people try to say, oh, you're out here for your Haitians, I'm out here for everybody. I'm out here for all of us who have been on the opposing side of what this country does to Black folks, what this country does to people of color. And so I see the work that I do on behalf of the Haitian community as necessary work, because we've never had this level of representation, right? It is important. We know that representation alone is not what's going to solve the issue. It's about policy, and it's about electing people who are going to bring that policy to bear. So when I'm talking about ending Title 42, which is a public health law that was originated in the Department of Homeland Security to say that we can't accept Haitians or we can't accept people coming from the border because of COVID, when it was being pushed by Homeland Security, which tells you that it was not really a public health emergency. It was this country's xenophobia and racism that was refusing our ability to accept migrants at the border. We know that we have work to do, because we are talking about anti-blackness in all of our carceral systems. The carceral system that exists within our immigration system, the carceral system that locks up our brothers and sisters across this country in prisons and jails. So when I'm doing the work of the Haitian community, I am doing the work of Black people. When we're talking about Haitian people, we're talking about the creative of Black liberation. We are talking about the only country that was founded out of a slave revolt. And we have to think about the fear that instilled in imperialist countries and the work that white supremacy did to suppress our ability to flourish. That's what we see at the border. That's what we see in stories like Robbie's. That's what we see in the continuous desire of this country to really talk about immigration as though it is not a Black issue, when it is very much a Black issue. And when we are able to understand that our destinies are tied together as Black folk, whether you are someone, your origin story is from Georgia and from somewhere in Africa, or whether you are from the Caribbean, that when we are united in solidarity, helping to fight carceral systems, helping to make sure that our people have access to basic needs, that includes food, that includes housing, that we are doing the work of justice for all of us. So.
Yeah, indeed. Right, creating community both within the immigrants, Black immigrant community, but also in the Black diaspora. And so I do want to go back to Robbie about this, because the harrowing experience that you've described to us, there was still community that you were able to create among those who were suffering with you. And now you're here, and so how do you create community here and still also try to solve your own immigration problems and get support to try to make sure that you can remain here?
I would say we're supporting each other. It's like, ever since we got here, the most friends and people that I met are the same one that we met in Tapachula. So we just had the same ideology, helping one another, supporting each other in any possible way, because we all know the pain and struggles that we've been through. So we wouldn't want to see anybody to go through the same process, or anybody in here to go through the same thing that we went through, because it's, I would say it's a living hell to see another human being experience the same things. So we're just supporting one another and helping each other as a fellow brothers or sisters, just one as a family.
Yeah, and there are two things that need to be done. You have to create community, you also have to create justice. So I want you to start with you on this, Nana. What can we do pragmatically? What should we be thinking about in terms of what it would look like to create justice for Black immigrants that is specific to our communities and to our needs?
Well,
Just solve this whole problem.
so what we talk about with Baji, with our partners, is we have got to talk about what is happening with immigration as an issue of racial justice, right? So it's like, yes, immigration is a Black issue, but racial justice is also an immigration issue. We've got to be thinking about how do we bring racial equity to what's happening. And when we talk about racial equity, yes, some of it is bare bones. Have the same energy for Black migrants that you have for white Ukrainians.
Are also collecting at the southern border. border and coming in.
But they're coming in, yeah, I'm about to break it down. Within 2 weeks of that war, there was announced 100,000 refugees are going to be allowed in this country. And programs moved, you hear me? Housing and urban development, getting folks hooked up with housing, people figuring out how to unite with Ukraine. All of that happened 2 weeks after the war. They got TPS. Cameroonians were fighting for TPS for 7 years. Mali still needs TPS. Ethiopia still needs PTS. Bahamas still needs TPS. From the hurricane, they got an immediate end to deportations. An immediate end. Haitians are still being deported with TPS. Cameroonians are still being deported in spite of TPS, right? And so the basic bare bones, we watched people, black folks and others at the border, watched Ukrainians who flew into Cancun, then flew into Tapachula. I live in Atlanta, I didn't even know Tijuana. I didn't even know Tijuana had an airport. Flew into Tijuana. And then walked over a special lane that they opened that they had closed for a year and a half to come into this country. So we know they know how to have action. They're confused about what to do with folks being blessed. No, you're not. Do for them what you do for the Ukrainians, and you'll solve it. But again, we've talked about with respect to carceral systems. We have to end all these carceral systems. That's part of racial equity. We know that this system of caging, we know that these systems of enforcement, whether it be immigration systems or whether it be criminal sanctions, criminal punishment systems, they are rooted in anti-blackness. They are rooted in the enslavement of African people, who are now African American people in this country, right? And so we know that those systems cannot exist, and black migrants say that we have justice. Now, I'll be done soon. A couple more points. Black migrants are not going to leapfrog over African Americans into some land of milk and honey. So black immigrant justice is justice for African Americans. There is no separation, as was raised earlier. There's nothing, you're not going to be some highfalutin Ghanaian and now suddenly want to be in some space. That's what's not That's not what's going to happen for you. Whatever is happening to Mike Brown, that's what's going to happen to you, Botham Jean. Yes. That's what's going to happen to you, Patrick Loyola. There's not going to be some special secret sauce that we have as black migrants that's going to separate us, and to the same degree. We are 21% first and second generation black migrants of the general black population. So if African Americans are under the delusion that you can somehow be separate from black migrants, 20% of your population, and build power in this country, please drop that delusion immediately. Because that is not the reality. Our justice is fighting the system together and moving forward together.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, my parents were black immigrants for about 5 minutes until they got in good at the airport, and they were instantly just black.
Right.
And treated just as, you're just black once you get out that airport. Absolutely. Thank you. And you bring this up. I'm coming back to you in a moment, Yvonne, but I want to bring you in. First of all, because you were giving amens, and when you give amens in church, you might get called to testify. Because the reality is that I lived in South Florida for a really long time, where you literally saw boats with Haitian migrants and Cuban migrants come in together and get immediately separated the minute they came to shore, and the Haitians turned right back. So what Nana's talking about is just direct. It's open anti-blackness in our immigration system. So how do we go from that kind of open discrimination to justice?
Okay, I'm going to try to answer that question in a minute, but
Never get your question.
yeah, no, I think that this is what that looks like. It's elected politics, folks who have experienced it, who continue in the advocacy work, like Robbie. It's folks like Nana and the work that she's doing at Baji. It's people like my sister Yvonne that's making sure that we are talking about the physical and mental health of our migrants, and it's about policy. It's about organizing. One of the first things that I did in office was organizing other municipalities in Massachusetts and around the country to demand that the Biden administration end Title 42. In alliance with folks doing that on the federal level, like my congresswoman, with Baji, with everyone calling collectively for an end to a racist, xenophobic, Trump-era policy that if we elected to be Democrats and we elected to be progressive, should have on day one rejected, right? And we did not see that happen because of the anti-blackness in our system. So it's continuing to apply pressure. I, on Boston City Council, fight relentlessly for resources. Before there was an issue that folks even wanted to really talk about, fighting for some of our ARPA allocation to go to housing for our arriving migrants. And I didn't even say exclusively Haitian because I know that we are all in this together, right? And that's what I try to stress. I am Haitian American. I'm the daughter of two proud Haitians who came here with nothing, poor black immigrants who arrived at that airport and were black. Someone the other day tried to tell me that Haitians were black, and I was like, I do not have the mental space. I was like, I do not have the mental space to deal with this separation and division that y'all are trying to do, right? But that is the work, and I look, in the audience are my sisters in service from the State House, State Senator-elect Liz Miranda, State Representative Brandy Fluker-Oakley, who, straight up to them, who in the State House fought for an $8 million allocation to help with Haitian migrants who were arriving, right? Because no one was paying attention to us, right? And neither of them are Haitian, but they're black, and they realize that we are in this struggle together. It's about breaking down those barriers like Nana was talking about. If we're not for us, who will be for us?
Amen.
Right? And so that is the work of making sure that we continue to elevate and put pressure and translate that into resources and dollars and policy.
And I have one more question for Yvonne, and then we're going to send it out to questions, because any kind of, search for justice does have to include bodily justice, right? And we know that that's a national issue because, look, a migrant to Texas or to Florida could be a Massachusetts healthcare concern, just one private plane flight away from the Florida. Paid for by Florida taxpayers. It can happen at any moment. And so how do people who are new to the country, who are immigrants, particularly black immigrants, I think don't get the attention and so may not know how to seek the resources to access healthcare when it's so even hard for us to access even when we're already in.
Exactly, yeah. And I think you've highlighted we have some serious issues regarding our healthcare system. I think that's not news to anyone in this room. And so imagine migrating to the UK where there may be issues, but you may have better access to healthcare. So one of the things we also have to acknowledge, and I agree with everything that's been said about justice, but it should also play out in terms of how we deliver healthcare, right? And also acknowledge that in terms of how we advance the health of black migrants, acknowledging that we are not a monolith in terms of social determinants of health and unique healthcare behaviors, perceptions about health conditions, and for instance, health insurance. One of the studies that we conducted, we recruited African immigrants in the DC metro area, and only 60% of them had health insurance. And this was after Obamacare, and we expected that at least 80–90% of them would have health insurance, but only 60% had health insurance. So we need to make sure that they have timely access to health care, and everyone has access to preventative care. Because we cannot seek greener pastures and arrive here, work 3–4 jobs to take care of ourselves, our families back home, and that happens. And one thing I want to highlight is that, and you alluded to this earlier, we have immigrants, black immigrants in every sphere of our society, and healthcare workers who are black immigrants, right? And people don't acknowledge that. You think about the COVID-19 pandemic and everything healthcare workers did to get us through that crisis. Many of them are also black migrants, right? And they helped us get through the pandemic. And these black migrants are more likely to work longer hours. They're more likely to work in skilled nursing facilities, nursing homes. Think about who works in those settings. A lot of them are black migrants. So if we care about justice, we should also care about their health and their well-being and make sure they all have access to health care.
So let me open it up to questions. I don't know, where's the microphone holder? There she is. So we're going to ask you all, if you have a question, please come forward quickly and ask your question. Please direct it to one panelist, if you could. Don't be shy. Don't miss your opportunity.
While people are coming to the microphone, I did just want to, I don't want to get in trouble with too many parochial acknowledgments here. But I did want to make sure to acknowledge Erlene Joseph, who has been on the front line. She's the president of Haitian Bridge Alliance, and she's a partner with the House Haiti Caucus, which I proudly co-chair.
Hello, my name is Mariana. I really appreciate the panel and the frameworks that considered around criminalization, Black liberation, of course, disability justice. But I guess my question is for Nana. I was curious about gender, women, girls, CGNC folks as well.
Thank you for that question. I was trying to figure out in my brain, how do I get this stuff in? We don't have a lot of time. So the issue, Roger did a report that came out at the beginning, I think, of 2021, a gender justice report. And we talked to folks that were women, black immigrant women, black immigrant girls, black immigrant femmes, to talk about what are the issues that are concerning with them. And I think whether we're talking about the work that is, or what is happening with folks in Mexico and at these two borders, the southern border of Mexico and the northern border, which it shares with the United States, or what's happening within the country, very interesting the degree to which things that have to do with being a migrant and being black so very much are impacting mental health. A lot of conversation about mental health and the way that mental health is being impacted, not by what's happening with family members, but by what's happening with themselves, the capacity to be able to move in a country that, again, says it's a country of such promise, and then folks get here and they find that it's not the promise that people thought it was. And then when we look at what's happening with women, for example, in detention centers, what happened in Irwin Detention Center, what has happened in Stewart Detention Center with medical abuse, sexual abuse, what happened in Hutto with Cameroonian women who were talking about medical neglect, talking about sexual abuse, and literally protesting within the detention centers. When we talk about LGBTQ migrants, we know that black migrants generally are 6 times more likely to be put in solitary confinement in detention. LGBTQ migrants, particularly trans migrants, even more so than that, and spend even longer times in detention. And so when we start adding the other layers of identity, we see that the situation gets worse, not better, in the same way that it does in this society in general. Thank you for the question.
Hello, thank you guys for being here today. You guys are also amazing. This is very inspiring conversations. So my name is Juliana. I'm Ghanaian, and I attend Howard University, which is, as we all know, a historically black university. And being at Howard, I'm surrounded by a lot of students who fight and advocate for black liberation. I consider myself a Pan-Africanist, so I believe in Pan-Africanism. So my question for Ms. Nana is for the people who believe that black liberation cannot be achieved through politics or policy. What would you say to those people?
I'm sorry, one more thing. Is there anything else you'd like to share with this audience?
I'm an
Affiliation?
I'm an intern for the Honorable Congressman.
You're not very the lead.
Yes, we fight, we organize. This is what we do. Policy doesn't even happen without organization. This is a piece of things that a lot of times we don't think about. When we see moves that were made to defund the police, to have alternatives to policing that we see now, that happened because of organizers. Because if Congresswoman Pressley wants to do something, but there's no one talking about it, it becomes impossible for her to do, even if she thinks it's the most fabulous idea ever. We have to organize. And what this history in this country has shown us is that organizing, agitating is what causes policy change, right? And so we got to do the work.
Great question.
Hello, how you doing? My name is Whisper Sheep. I'm here on the Elijah Gomez team. My question is for the lady in the red dress.
That's what Congresswoman called me. She's on it.
Sorry, because I came in a little late.
Yes,
my thing is to you, how you said that you have 2 immigrant Haitian parents, and I can relate to the immigrant parents because my father's from Nairobi, Kenya. So my question is to you, where do you see the immigrant families, like where do you see them in the next 10 years coming into this country, coming here to start a dream, coming here to start a family, coming here to start a legacy for themselves? Like the first generation immigrants, where do you see these programs and these situations that help them in the next couple of years? Where do you see it?
Give me your name again.
Whisper.
Whisper?
Whisper Sheepwood.
Okay. That was a really excellent question because I think it goes back to showing how all of our issues are interconnected. So let's take the issue of like people want to become homeowners, right? And in Boston, it is becoming almost impossible for working class families, and include our immigrant families, to be able to buy homes, right? So much of, folks don't come to this country because like they don't love their home. My parents love Haiti. My father's ideal is sitting under a tree with a mango in one hand and avocado in another. Like, he wants nothing to do. My grandmother will not come to this country. She's back in Haiti. I graduated from Harvard. She's like, okay, congratulations. You know what I mean? I'm staying here in Haiti. But we come here and we try to like do right by our children. We try to make sure that they get an education. We try to make sure that we can put food on the table. Those are the struggles of Black people. Those are the struggles of working class families. And so when we're talking about making home ownership a reality by creating programs that help people with down payments and closing costs, we're talking about work that's going to help our immigrant families, but also going to help Black folks and going to help redress the policy harm created by redlining and other policies that we've engaged in when we do the work of equity, which is correcting for our tax harms. And it includes our Black migrants, it includes Black people. And so, when you're talking about where do I see immigrant families as we go forward in a country that with increasing inequality, it requires the work, the organizing work that Nana was talking about, that translates to the policy on the ground to make sure that we are not leaving our folk and our people behind in a country and in a world that is so concerned about greed and material gain, right? So the work that we must do to ensure that immigrant families are able to, access their basic needs and provide for their children is the work that we do every day for working class families. And so I don't see the immigrant dream as something that's completely separate from what everyday folks are fighting for, right? And it is in that work of translating that to like, we are bound together. One of my favorite quotes is we are each other's harvest, we are each other's business, and we are each other's magnitude and bond, and understanding that we are all bound together is the work that I'm trying to do, and I think is where I want to see immigrant families and Black families and working class families really succeed 10 years from now. So, thank you.
This question is for Councilor Lujan. How are you? Good morning to the panelists. My name is Darren Johnson. I lead the policy department for the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts. And one of the questions I want to ask is about resources. And one of the things that I've been researching and studying about is around job training for immigrants. I'm the son of a Trinidadian woman who came to this country, and one of the things she struggled with was getting an education and being able to get a job that was affordable to support her family going back home. What are our organizations committed to closing the racial wealth gap, as well as creating economic opportunities for all Black folks, Black and brown folks across, for the state of Massachusetts? What are ways that organizations like MECMA, who are committed to closing the racial wealth gap in this country, can work with leaders such as yourself and the panelists as well, to make community and create those partnerships for immigrants in this country? Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. And you can also call me Lady in Red, because brother, I don't know Lady in Red. But I mean, so there are two ways that I can answer that question. I'm going to answer it the way I want to answer the first one. It's in response to this immediate crisis, this immediate humanitarian issue that we're dealing with arriving Black migrants. When we talk about the plane of 50 folks from Venezuela that Governor DeSantis fraudulently sent to Martha's Vineyard, right? Deceptively. And I had people in Boston coming up to me and saying, I want to go help, I'm going to go to Martha's Vineyard because of the migrant crisis, and how dare you? I'm going to go, you want to help migrants? Let me take you to Madison Square. And show you the 100 Haitian migrants who arrived 5 days ago. Like, you know what I mean? And these migrants are arriving, they're being paroled, but they are not, and once they receive parole, they're able to work, but they need that work authorization. So there's a lot of pressure that we can collectively put on the government on speeding up the ability of people to work in this country once they're here. And we're talking about, my mom was 37 years a nursing assistant in a hospital. We're talking about all of these systems, and I can talk to Boston specifically, where there are shortages. We have shortages, and we have migrants who are on parole who can work, but are waiting on documentation. And when you look at other migrant populations, okay, that are not Black, they get their work authorizations like this. Why are we waiting? And so if there's pressure that Beckman wants to help pressure, like, look, we want to engage in job training, but we know that we have a lot of Haitian migrants and Black migrants here who are waiting on their work authorization. You can help in that advocacy, of course. And then there are also really, another way of answering the question, a lot of great organizations that do work around job training that definitely we can connect with. There's a Jewish Vocational Alliance, does a lot of services, does a lot of work with immigrants. There's True Alliance Center. There are a lot of organizations that we can plug together to make that work.
Appreciate it.
Lady in red, thank you.
Hello, ladies. I want to say thank you for your time, first off.
I'll take that time, please.
No, so for the last 6 years, I fought really hard to be a representative of Black youth and use my voice to kind of uplift problems within my city. And we've inspired individuals from all sorts of countries, 23 different countries, to Iraq. But why I'm here, and the question I have is, both my parents, unfortunately, are immigrants, and when my dad got arrested by ICE, I became homeless, which sparked the need for my organization to use our voices to raise funds in our community in Jacksonville, Florida. Unfortunately, there's a high wave of violence in Jacksonville, Florida, the murder capital of Florida, and I've made it my mission, as well as those gentlemen over there have made it their mission, to use our voices to go into our city, into our governments, into the places where the conversation is being had, and inform them that we're not getting the adequate resources that are needed to make the change. And the first question I have more so is, why is it so hard for us to partner up? And what is it that we do not know that needs to be known for us to make it easy to have these connections? Because if we didn't hop on this plane to come here, I would have never known about any of these immigration programs and the reinstatement. Because my dad worked years without that immigration reinstatement to be able to work, and legal work had to be done to at least survive. I have 6 siblings, so it's very difficult to continue. So I want to know that, because if there is a solution there, I want to figure out how we can use digital connections, conversational connections, flyers, spaces, Twitter spaces, Instagram spaces, Reels, whatever needs to be possible to make it a known fact of where to get these resources. That was long.
Okay, I'll speak to that in a moment, but while I'm gathering myself, because, the resilience and the brilliance of us is just blinding sometimes. And I just want to lift up these young Black men. If you all would stand and face the whole room, because I want them to see utilities in your message. And I do want to say, I thank you for sharing your story. There is such a power. I grew up in the church, and so I learned early on the power of testifying, right? And storytelling is, along with movement building, is the only way that we move any issue, that we actualize justice is through your storytelling. However, I do look forward to a day where people do not have to relive their trauma in order to compel action from their government. But I do thank you for sharing your story. I want you to also say the name of your organization, and I'm going to ask anyone in this room who can be a mentor, a resource to this organization to make sure you connect with these young men before they leave. What's the name of the organization?
EVAC Movement.
EVAC Movement. Okay, very good.
A backwards, so that way we get out of the cave of darkness.
Okay, and then, on a broader, sort of more systemic level, I would say, as a person in government, I find this incredibly frustrating as well. So often, we fight and are successful in what we do in these spaces and places every day, both harm reduction and also advancing things, and that means federal resources, and then the people who need it most don't have a grant writer or even know where to begin, or don't have a relationship with their local elected officials. So I want to encourage you to start there. If you don't know who your city councilor is, if you don't know who your state rep, your state senators are, your member of Congress, your senator, we can help you to get that information because we're accountable to you. And you are deserving of those resources, and they do exist. So I'll stop there because I want to give you the most pragmatic advice possible, and we can follow up further, all right? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good morning. I forgot how powerful it is to be back in this space, so forgive me if it takes me a few minutes to kind of catch myself together. My name is P.S. Collins. I'm a first generation Brooklynite. My parents immigrated from Jamaica 26 years ago now. I'm also a UConn law student and an up-and-coming young professional that has undergone several organizations, including the ALC at the national level. With that being said, as my parents were for me undocumented and having to go through that struggle, I want to ask a question. I'm starting to figure out that it wasn't until college that I had to separate my Jamaicanness from my blackness. How do we now disrupt, my apologies, anti-blackness within black spaces? Because I'm struggling with like being in a space where I see myself reflected, but it's not, they hear the accent and all of a sudden it starts changing up, and try to navigate that as well.
You want to direct that at one first?
No, I can go, yeah. I first have to acknowledge that it's tough, it's challenging, and I've had similar experiences where some of the most hurtful comments have come from other Black people. But it's not an accident that happened, right? But I see an opportunity because there are other immigrant communities in the U.S. that have done a great job in terms of building a community, organizing. So imagine what would happen when Black migrants arrived in the U.S. and our African-American brothers welcomed us with open arms and really supported us in terms of organizing, navigating the healthcare system. Imagine what difference that would make, right? But unfortunately, I think we've all experienced a lot of trauma, and some of those experiences come from manifestation of violence that people have experienced here. But I think there's an opportunity for younger generations to really change those perceptions and band together. Because what Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley said is, Black lives matter, we all matter, and we all need to work together. And the things that divide us really get in the way of us advancing what we would call the Black agenda, right?
Well, they're giving us the signal that we have to wrap.
Oh.
I'm not sure how compliant we need to be. So I'll look to my team. We do have to wrap. Oh, okay. Oh, no. Okay. All right, everyone. Please. So thank you all for joining us. And the reason why we're wrapping, I guess, is for the production aspects of this and that we are being streamed online. Thank you, Joy and Reed, for your stewardship.
Thank you.
Of these brilliant and insightful experts. Thank you to each and every one of you. And I know time is short, but I just need every member of my A team to stand.
Yeah.
Because let me just say this. I am the first person of color, period, elected to my delegation's 230-year history. When I broke that concrete ceiling, I cannot do the work of liberation if I was not intentional about having people on my team who know what it is to be marginalized and oppressed. I am very proud of them. I am grateful for them. And so if you all would stand, I have staff here. And then finally, I do have to acknowledge always my partner in good, my husband, Conan Harris. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you all. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Anna.